ye, gamer sups is truly the most delicious and effective energy formula in the land. Well, at least that I've tried. And not to toot my own horn, but I've tried a lot of energy drinks. Be ye poor or rich, alike ye may come and tasteth with 10% off. Code Thorin, Thorin. Good day to you, sirs. Now, ropz is one of the best CSGO players in the world. Ever since fans knew Carrigan would be leaving mousesports, going to FaZe, it was rumoured many, many months ago the deal just had to go ahead and be done, or his contract had to run out. They basically thought that meant, right, the team's going to take a dive because Carrigan was the architect of them being an elite level team. And obviously players in the past who were very, very good are long since gone from this lineup. Now, it actually turned out at a flashpoint they won the event. So, okay, that's kind of been a blip out of nowhere. We're talking about months and months ago. So the speculation became, right, obviously now ropz needs to leave as well. Just as Carrigan needed a better team, a chance to win the major or something, now ropz needs a chance to be in the best team. So people thought, what if he goes to FaZe Clan, works for Carrigan again? What if he goes to G2, joins up with Nico and those guys? What if he goes to OG, another team that might need one more big fragger, right? That might be the last move for a number of these teams to become number one. So it became a dream move for many fans, including, by the way, as far as I can tell, ropz. Like, it's been indicated to me that potentially, yeah, he wanted to go to some of these teams, or there was interest and he was totally open to it. I mean, he's a guy who's a very driven player. Actually, I did an interview with him. I know he wants to be one of the best players. And, quite frankly, his level of play, listen, Flashpoint was a nice one-off, but it deserves, in theory, a better team than mousesports. We don't really know yet how good mousesports is going to be. It would be a very big surprise if they were as good as some of those teams with ropz would be, you'd imagine. The issue is, he signed a contract, I think it was last year, for a couple more years, nicer salary, blah, blah, blah. So as a result, I've heard his contract doesn't end until April 2022, next year. So we're talking like many, many months, like 10 months from now or something. So as a result, if you want him and you're one of those orgs, it doesn't matter if he wants to go, it doesn't matter if you want him, you need to buy him out from mousesports, his current team. So he becomes, in my opinion, especially because right now, it's such a big move that everyone would love to see, except maybe mousesports if the buyout isn't high enough. He becomes a great example, in my opinion, of how out of touch buyouts are in CSGO now. And listen, I put some of the blame on the buyouts on the orgs because they're the ones paying it and making the market. But at the same time, they have to try and get the best players and they have to try and succeed as well as do business, right? So it's kind of tough. So I'm also going to flex and end up putting most of it actually onto players themselves in a different way, though. I think each person carries a can in some sense. The team org, the team orgs that are buying them, team org that's surprise, team org that's buying them, the player involved, and the agents that facilitate or not some of these deals, as it were. So in ropz's case, this is a guy who a few years ago when we were playing LANs was a top 10 to 20 player in the year, depending on what time we're talking about in 2019. He's still a very good player. Last year, in 2020, even when mousesports sucked, quite frankly, he's young, he's only 21. He doesn't have much wear and tear in terms of having played a million LANs. He only became pro in 2017. So potentially, he has many years of prime play left if this is his prime, and it's possibly could get even better. He could become like a best player in the world 1 or 2 years down the line. Now, the thing is, he plays for mousesports, and that has been an org which traditionally in CSGO hasn't been near the top of the game in terms of as org, as a business, in terms of paying the most salary, having the most money to buy players. They were only really an elite org in 1.6, and even then, towards the end, obviously only in the German scene. So if you look at the trend, typically, talent leaves mousesports when they're really good. They then go through a cycle of recruiting lesser players or players who haven't made it yet or need a chance. So as a result, actually, they're kind of like Fnatic in League of Legends, if you get the reference and you follow that game as well. They've just done a very good job recruiting players over the years, quite frankly. I think they've done an awesome job. That's why I draw the reference point. Now, tons of teams, I've heard tons of teams have inquired about ropz and what is his buyout and seeing if they can get it done. But the thing is, unsurprisingly, you don't blame them in principle, mousesports wants to get a lot of money or they won't sell him and they'll just sit and they'll let the contract run out and they'll use him as a player and hope they get results from him instead. Whether that means they end up getting nothing in 10 months or so, from 9 to 10 months from now, and they're willing to gamble that, apparently. The question is, are the other orgs? I mean, there's so many orgs in inquiring. I get it that they wouldn't want to go, well, I'll lower the price. Like, no, let's see who's willing to pay. It's a bidding war, right? This is one of the most, in theory, eligible star players in the world. Also, by the way, carries no reputation of, like, hard to deal with, like, bad attitude. Everyone sings this guy's praises. So right now, it's hard to find a more eligible player you'd want to sign, since maybe when I mean, obviously, Device moving recently would be a pretty good one. I think Nico back in the old mouse spots, not a bad example. So I will say, because it's worth updating, I've pointed out many times, if you go back a couple of years when Mousebox was one of the best teams in the world with the Kris J, Oscar, Sonny lineup, etc. Back then, the team in the server was massively outperforming the org in terms of finances because they used to get a pitiful salary compared to the Virtus Pros and the Norths of the world back then at that point, I mean Cloud9 maybe. Now, I've heard ropz' salary is very good. Like he has a pretty high salary. It's pretty legit. I've heard, though, it might only be him in the current team that gets that kind of money, though. And maybe like Carrigan did before, but there weren't many in this like recent crop who were on that kind of money. And obviously he re-signed and after he'd had his success and being the best player on the team. I've heard he does have bonuses, though, if he makes top 4 at big events and stuff. So you can trigger those and make even more money. So salary side, I have no issue with this. This isn't like if years and years ago Mousebox wanted $500,000 for Nico, but they pay him fuck all in contrast. And you're like, what the hell? That's way more than even like a year or two salary. That's when I had a really big issue with the team org side of setting the salary. But okay, let's think about this for a second. If we look just out ignoring the market angle and looking relative to each other, how can Nico's buyout be reported at like $500,000 to FaZe in 2017, so 4 years ago, and he was arguably, if not the best player, like a top 3 player individually in the world, but salaries haven't 4x'd, but the buyout for someone like ropz is like 3 times the amount or something like that? Basically what I've heard. Well, the reason is because it's a market, right? It's about who's willing to pay that, or what reason do you have to not want to sell? Like, are you willing to gamble that someone goes to more? I'll even say, by the way, if you want to know how salaries work, because if you don't know economics, like all of us pretty much don't, it's worth going to the people who are experts and find out how they explain how a market works, as Lurpus does in this clip from my clip channel about salary. So, put it this way, just to contrast this and get into the video. Basically, I've heard that as a result, Mousebox wants like 1.5 times like Device's buyout to get this guy. By the way, Device is a 4-time major winner, 2-time major MVP, and has won the most MVPs from HLTV.org in the history of the game, and is still arguably in his prime. ropz isn't a better player than Device, my dude. Or at least it's debatable when we're online, right? Past examples, if you think about them. So, as I said, in 2017, Nico was reported for $500,000. I don't really believe that one entirely myself, just like I don't believe the old Scream one. 2018, Stewie 2K supposedly went to MIBR for $500,000, and then FNS as his replacement and IGL cost $200K, as Jack Etienne said publicly. 2018, there was that story where when MBK and Apex were in G2 and hadn't left yet to form what would eventually become Vitality, supposedly the buyouts were $800,000 each for those players, hence they were just benched and they waited to see if people would buy them out. I would imagine for nowhere near that amount of money. 2019, the very same Vitality that would actually have those players signed what looked like a pretty washed shocks towards the end of 2019. It was like September or something, which the French reporter Nell, and listen, if anyone's going to report what Vitality wants them to say, this really guy, right, I suspect, he claimed it was something like $350K to $400K for a player that at the time never looked like they were going back to star level, and quite frankly, I don't think ever realistically did for more than like a month or a few weeks at a time. So still a pretty high buyout for him. 2020, we have obviously another Nico one, which was reported he went to G2 for something like between $750K and $1 million, but again, was a very, very good player with an incredible history and a lot of prime left. I heard in 2020, another one, I've reported this myself in terms of like, I've said it on shows. I wouldn't say report in that way, except for like colloquial use in English. But I've heard if you wanted to sign Bobski before he was a starter in Astralis, more recently, it'd cost you about $700K. That's the kind of money that they were asking for from teams that were inquiring. And unsurprisingly, nobody wanted to pony that up for fucking Bobski, who was being left just on the shelf, just rotting away and regressing, right? In 2021, we have the Device signing where supposedly it was like €1 million, I believe is the fee they reported in the press. I've heard, and Richard's made some good points to argue that sounds pretty exaggerated, and there's maybe some fuckery as to how that number was calculated, and it's maybe just for the press. So the issues here mainly are about the buyout multiplier. That's the issue I have. How much is the buyout relative to what you would pay that player in salary remaining? So in the case of someone like ropz, I do think it's a bit silly if you're asking for 3 to 4 times the amount of salary remaining on his contract as the buyout. Because if I sign him, I then have to pay him a salary too. And it's probably going to be more, right? Because he's trying to go for a bigger opportunity, a better team, blah, blah, blah. So I think that this is an example where the team org tries to get a bit too much. Like, I've heard it his buyout was something like well over $1 million. I've heard like closer to $1.5 million. So I think personally something like $1 million, if we look at some of the other numbers, is more reasonable for ops. You still get very well compensated if you're mouse spots. You can buy a number of good players who can be the next ops potentially, and you end up in a better financial scenario. I think if you wait it out and no one ends up signing him, you actually lose if you mouse spots, even though you get to have him play for you, because you're probably not going to win that many events, especially if we go to LAN again, you have an inexperienced in-game leader in Dexter. Now, I will say, look, it's not the end of the world, because I do think with how many teams were inquiring, eventually someone's going to pay. I just don't think it's going to be $1.5 million. I think it probably will be closer to the $1 million, and maybe it'll just be when the contract ticks down a little bit more, because the player apparently is open to it. So how do we resolve this, right? That's part of the issue. I mean, there isn't really a system in place where it's like, this is the multiplier for that. You just set the values you want and people sign the contracts, right? I do think having, I think the buyout personally should be stated in the contract when you sign it. That is something, if I was a player or agent, I would demand. I think the idea they can just set any buyout, that seems ridiculous. I don't even suspect, again, I'm not a legal expert, that would hold up in court. I don't think anyone has the money or quite frankly, the will or the impetus to push that through court. So I think that's something for the future when esports gets bigger, or in a game like League of Legends maybe, where they have enormous amounts of money involved in it. I get it, okay? Unlike others, I'm not going to go, but he wants to leave and the other team want him and the players on that team want him, so you should let him go. Grow up, child. That's not the way the world works. So I get it that the team he's on, mouse spots in this case, remember, we're using him as a general example, they need to be compensated. They've got one of the best players in the world. They found him, by the way. They re-signed him last year, by the way. Don't they deserve to have a top player? Fuck deserve. They just have a top player. It's none of your business. They own that player essentially for this period of time. They've leased him effectively, right? Now, when you consider Team Orgs and CS at the top level, maybe not mouse spots, they might be losing very little. I don't know, they seem like they min-max pretty well. Most of them are losing money on top teams because of the enormous salaries, because of these buyouts, because you don't make that much rev from the game dev and from the TOs, hence why the whole Flashpoint project was started in the first place. So I don't want to hear, by the way, the idea that you're hard exploiting the players when you ask for big buyouts. Because here's how the concept of exploiting someone in capitalism is supposed to work. It's the idea that you hire people because you need more people to do part of the work in your business, and therefore make you more money because you have more people working on it. Then you make more profit because you had them work for you. You pay them a tiny fraction, as little as you can, and you get as much profit as you can back. Therefore, you're exploiting their labour to make a lot of money, right? The problem in this scenario is that doesn't even apply, because in this case, it's the player that's exploiting the org. He's getting paid way more because of inflated market value than he ever makes back to the actual employer, the team in this case, for his play, his work in the server, and his media requirements for that matter. That's one of the reasons why I get disgusted when I hear players turning down media days or saying they don't want to do interviews. Who the fuck are you? You're not doing shit for your org. Now listen, that's for your org to deal with, but I can call you up publicly as well. So in this scenario, because the team orgs are at war with each other and don't have any kind of a deal, that's going to continue. Now, I will say, if you're pro players and you keep fucking around with some of these salary demands on stuff, listen, you'll end up with a scenario where there'll be a Flashpoint scenario, and not only that, they'll just make a cartel/salary cap, and they'll just make it that the team players in their league have the salary cap in that scenario. That'll happen one of these days if people stop being short-sighted on the team org side and they realise if they work together, the top orgs can basically shut out this scenario and not have the same problem. Depends how much they want to go to war with each other, right? To be fair, League of Legends and LCS, they haven't really done something like that. Obviously harder in the sense that you have to have Riot, the game dev, involved, whereas you don't in CSGO. Now, the question obviously is what is reasonable as a buyout, right? Because it can go the other way, and you can have a buyout that's way too low in your contract, and it can fuck the org. I've heard this is what happened to Mad Lions, because Mad Lions lost their 3 best players. They lost Bobski, was arguably the best player in the server at that time. Acor was very good and had a lot of potential. And Shush was a revelation in 2020 when he came along and they won Flashpoint 1. These were 3 players that it was obvious they should one day play for teams if North was around, obviously them, Heroic, maybe Astralis, if in the case of people like Bobski and Acor. Now, I think it's incompetence in that regard that the team orgs set the buyouts too low and you could just buy them for not that much once they got really good. That's silly on their end. They weren't looking in the long term. They were short-sighted and maybe just signed them because they were tricked players. Well, how good they can really be in this amount of time, right? Now, obviously the market is what is determining these factors. You can set a price at wherever you want. If no one's willing to pay it, you'll never get that price. If you set the price too low and loads of people want it, that's also kind of silly, right? It depends how many people are in the bidding war, as it were. The issue for me, as I said earlier with mouse spots, is when you end up with no buyers as a result of the high price. Now, you can say, I'm using that to force people and pressure them over time, that eventually, they're going to come back and say, what about 90% of that? And now a couple of months have gone off, and maybe I'm waiting for the sweet spot where it makes sense. Yeah, I get that. The problem, in my opinion, is this. A lot of why a team like mouse spots holds on a player like ropz is that they're gambling that one of these teams has bad enough results or really desperately needs that last piece to get to number one, maybe for the major, that they just panic buy, maybe when the contract's gotten even shorter, and they get anywhere close to the amount they want. And they can really say, oh, that was worth it, was worth waiting. It's kind of like, if you want an analogy, when you hear about, runs on essential products like toilet paper or something, there's a shortage, and so some guy's hoarded it and he can now gouge the price and charge way, way more, right? Now, I will say, the problem in Counter-Strike and esports in general is the other team isn't going to get anywhere near the value from a really high buyout as they will in sports, when you hear in European football, soccer, about the stories of Beckham joining Real Madrid or Neymar joining PSG. When those players join those teams, they're going to sell a bazillion jerseys, going to ensure tickets are sold, media attention. You can make it back through other means there, maybe even more so, hence why some of those deals are done. In my opinion, the teams doing the buying do need to be a lot smarter, though. For now, when the buyouts are this crazy, if you want good players, you have to think about it. I made this point years ago with the case of Skadoodle, actually, where I actually think these teams need to understand, because contracts end at different times in the game. It's not like League of Legends where they end at the end of a year or you have to wait till off-season or something. Make a short list of all the prospective people you want in all the roles. Then if you go to a ropz and it's just way too high, you have backups. You have other people like, well, this guy's contract ends in 2 months. Worst case scenario, we could also just wait against them. Therefore, maybe I can leverage that as to whether I want to buy from him, or I can tell them I won't buy from you and I'll get this other player in 2 months. There's a way of doing it. For example, if I wanted to sign Electronic, he's the best player for an entry type position I think I can get in the world. He would complete my team. Well, you know what? If I'm going and Navi wants $2 million, but I can go and I find out that Axile's contract ends in a month, or he's actually available for 750k. Listen, the difference between the two of them, if we're online, I'll take Electronic. Axile's done fuck all. But you know what? If we're online and it's 2 million versus 750k, I just take Axel there. It makes more sense all around, especially when I'm losing money in the game. I will say as well, as I alluded to at the beginning, I want to put a lot of this on the players and their reps, though, their agents potentially, or whoever's helping me with their deals. These people need to take responsibility. The primary issue, in my opinion, lies with them, because they actually help create some of the scenario by blindly going into these situations. Because it is still the case that players and agents are so short-sighted, they worship the almighty total dollar sign for the salary. And as a result, they go and they gun for the highest number on the total dollar amount in the salary, and they still naively think that more years on the contract's better for me, even if I'm a prime player, and a year down the line, maybe the market's gone up even more and I could get twice as much. No, they don't think about any of that. And they still, by the way, for some reason, don't think, maybe there's more to life than just money. Maybe in the future, I might want more than just my salary from this org. So they don't consider, and this is what I want to stress, taking less salary or negotiating slightly less salary or slightly less bonuses to ease up some of the other conditions and get, for example, a higher salary if you're benched, or get the same salary if you're benched. If you want to go crazy, don't know if you're going to get that though. You could ask for a transfer clause, as you sometimes find in sports like the NBA, where if you're an elite tier player, you say, I want a transfer clause where I can either demand a transfer, or I can veto a transfer, or I can select sort of a set of destinations, and then you go out there and you make the deal with one of those teams. I would describe it this way: hedge your future. Don't gamble at all. You being the best now, your team remaining among the best, you not needing to join another team, and them not putting an enormous buyout that no one can pay. Give yourself options. Negotiate with this in mind, knowing it has happened again and again, and will happen to players who need to join your team as well. Because can you really call it contract prison if you willingly, eagerly in some cases, put yourself into it? And everyone told you before what could happen, and you just ignored it to look at the 29,000, 40,000 a month. That's all you cared about. But so you chose to go to prison in that scenario. Now listen, did you really imagine that you should be paid a normal guy's yearly salary per month to be bad at the game if you ever actually became not good and they bench you and they want to pay you less? I'm not calling you out specifically, Smiths. Probably too old a reference, maybe Freiburg for Dignitas. I don't really know. I doubt they make mega box at this point in time. Now, agents, I think, right now are super predatory because they make their money at the moment from short-sighted goals, like just the signing fee up front or a percentage of the player's salary. So they're actually incentivized to get the player to sign just right now, get the deal done because I get the signing fee up front in that case. And in terms of the percentage of salary, let's lock him in for as many years as possible. Like they actually think that's in their interest. I don't think that's always in the player's interest. And they then go and complain publicly regardless and always play victim and always make you feel sorry for the poor player having to sign for 30,000 and he doesn't even get to just leave next month and go wherever he wants to a fucking rival who's going to beat my team for almost nothing. That's so unfair. Grow up, please. So as a result, by the way, the idea that you just want to leave for a better team, that in itself's kind of messed up, right? What if your old team is good and that's fine? Doesn't that require some tact, some decency in how you handle it? I hope we can acknowledge they shouldn't just let you walk. That would be, after how much they paid you and built their team around you, that would be ridiculous, right? At the same time, I will say, that team would absolutely bench you or drop you if they felt like you'd fallen in form too much, you were a bad attitude, blah, 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 or they got a huge buyout offer, especially remember, here's the scenario people don't think about. Because we're not quite sports yet, these contracts some of these guys have with no clauses in. There's a world where in the future, the team might even just sell you to someone you don't want to go and play for, a worse team, but just has loads of VC money. And you just go to that team because they pay twice as much. Now you're in a shitter team, but with an enormous buyout that you've just signed through. Like, there's a world where things like that could potentially happen as well. Now, I will just say this if you're a player. Short-term contracts allow you more flexibility. So I think some players should look at their career and say, I'm cool where it is right now. Say I've got 6 months left of my contract. I'm in my peak. I'll gamble. I'll wait the 6 months. And if after the end of 6 months I want to sign with the team again, great. Then I negotiate a better deal. I get some extra clauses because I have all the power because I'm a free agent now. If not, I try the market. And you know what? With no buyout, I'm incredibly eligible. I'm going to have even more choices to where to go because I'm free to sign and then get my salary. And this guy's $1 million who's at my level. Why players haven't figured this out, I don't know, because it is the play in the NBA, by the way, if you do this approach. So if you do that, I'll even give you another angle people don't think about with agents. If you wait the months that your contract needs to end, and then you go to one of those teams, now when they're all bidding against you, don't just get great salary and clauses. Why not ask for what would have been some of the signing bonus? Why not ask for some of what would have been the buyout money as a signing bonus up front? Like, they didn't have to pay $1 million for you, so how about ask for 100k up front that day, get it transferred? Well, you get my premise, you just start out in an awesome scenario. I think that's the future. If players and fucking agents actually get their head in the game and agents stop predatorily exploiting the fucking players who they're representing. Don't just re-sign this current contract because the lineup's good now and you want to play with them. That is a child's way of thinking about the economics and finances and your job security. Lineups rarely exist for over a year at the top level. So I just had a great year with them. Well, then no one knows if you're going to do this year. There's a lot of uncertainty and things could change in 1 or 2 months in Counter-Strike. Think about your careers, guys. It isn't just a graph like that. It's not some fucking ridiculous crypto scam, is it? Then let's say one last thing. Teams and players do lie about buyouts, including in the press, including saying numbers that are just not true. Partly in terms of players, because a lot of them are clueless and just hearing hearsay from others. Like some of the salaries they quote, I go and investigate, they're not even right. They've just heard it from a player who's bragging over a beer somewhere. Similarly, teams, both the ones selling and the ones buying, sometimes lie just to get better press, because it sounds sexier, right? That you signed a guy for $1 million when really you just signed him for $500,000, but we both say $1 million. Sounds like I'm a genius for selling for $1 million, and I've got loads of money for buying it for $1 million. Look how serious I'm. Like, yeah, there's that whole angle, because it can help both sides, but I don't know the solution, because at the moment it's not really a solution, is it? There's a whole bunch of different moving pieces and players involved in this in a market at work, and the question is everyone going to keep just basically having a war of attrition and bleeding each other dry, or are we going to get to some point where financially it makes sense? There are certain basic guidelines, I won't say rules, guidelines in place as to what kind of a multiplier you use, when people can go, if players choose to re-sign, what clauses they want. I think people need to just think about all the surrounding elements of this pretty big and crazy sounding issue.
Hey, it's simple, you're watching Thorin channel. Shut the fuck up, you fucking bitch.
Oi! This video was kindly supported by Eddie, Kris with a K, Lager15, Pronogo, Shenlong, Zachary Carter, Zack Schmidt, Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Dean Tanglis, Doomseer, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, and Zyrathenia. And as always, special thanks go out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Want to suggest a topic or a guest? Do you want to ask a question in one of those AMAs? Do you want teasers? See who the guests are? Maybe you want to take part and chat with me in one of those esports discussions. Well, for all of the above, put your money where your mouth is, join the Patreon link in the description box below, and become a part of the Skrilluminati.